Okay, in this video we're going to learn how to write quadratics in completed square form. Okay, so this is our completed square form. Now, there are some things about this that can be different. So, for example, this negative can be plus or minus. Okay, it doesn't have to be subtraction. That is going to be dependent on what our B term is, okay? And then for this a in front, sometimes you'll have a value there if we have a number in front of x squared that we need to take out, but sometimes a is 1 and we don't usually write that. It is also possible that k would be 0 out here. That could happen occasionally, and then you wouldn't have to write it. But this is our general form. Now, there are some other forms you may see on the questions when they ask you for those. So you might see something that would look like this. And in this case, notice that it's just different letters. We don't have to use A, H, and K. We can use M and N. So don't get hung up on that on the question. You might see this with an A in front. And generally when they do that, this is signaling to you that you should have an A in front. So you should have taken something out. And we'll look at that when we do these examples. You might also see A minus P times x plus q squared. And this is a different form and we're going to talk about how to get there. But so don't get hung up on the question if you see different letters. Just recognize that we have some parentheses here squared with a number out to the side and possibly a number in front. And so what we want to do is we want to write it in completed square form. Just kind of recognize these all and lump them together. And then at the end, for this particular form, if we need to, we can deal with how to get this A in front. Okay, so let's just look at some examples. Okay, so you'll see that this one says, express each of the following in this form. Again, the letters don't matter, but it does look like this form to me. So I'm going to recognize that as completed square form, and I'm going to go about doing that. So you'll notice that this x squared has like a 1 in front. It doesn't have a number other than positive 1. So we don't have to take an a out like you see up here. We're just going to start with this piece of information. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this term, this negative 12x, and we're going to take the coefficient, which is negative 12, and we're going to divide it by 2. That gives us negative 6. So we're always going to do that with our b, which remember is the number in front of x. And what we're going to write is we're going to have x, and then whatever this value was, we have negative 6, so x minus 6, and we're going to put squared. Always put squared because this is a quadratic. What we have to remember to do is whatever this value was, we then have to subtract that value squared. Okay, so those are the steps that we're going to take. And so what I have here is I have x minus 6 squared. We're going to leave that. And then minus, and this negative 6 squared is going to be 36. So this is the completed square form that I wanted, that you can see here. If I needed to, in this case, I could say that h was 6. And you got to be careful about that. H is 6. H is not negative 6 in this case because they had a minus there also. All right, and then in this case, k would be negative 36. Now, you don't have to state those. We weren't asked for it. We were just asked to express them in this form, but that's going to be important later on, okay? All right, so let's look at this one. Again, what do I want to do? I want to take this b term, which is 20, and I want to divide by 2. In this case, I get a positive 10. So we are going to write x, and then whatever this value is, and since it's positive, we're going to write plus 10 squared, and then I'm always going to subtract, it's always subtraction, whatever that number was squared. And then we just simplify, but when we simplify, we're always going to leave this part as x plus 10 squared. We're just going to do this math right here. So 10 squared is 100. And that is my completed square form. That's all that we're being asked to do. Now, again, since this was plus, in this case, h had to be a negative 10, so that when I plug it into this formula, I would get plus. So this one's always going to be opposite. And then k in this case is negative 100. Again, in this case, we are not asked for those, but it is important to understand that this inside one is always going to be the opposite sign, because I would have to plug a negative in here to have a double negative to make plus. Okay, let's look at another example. Again, we are asked to express this in this form. Notice that now you have m and n. It doesn't matter what the letters are, okay? But we also have this value out here now, whereas we didn't before. But the process is exactly the same. We are going to take this b term, and we're going to divide by 2, and that's going to give us 3. So we are going to write x plus 3, since it's positive, squared. But then we're always going to subtract that same value squared. But in this case, since we have this 4 here, we have to bring that 4 back down. So we have to say plus 4. And then again, this part is going to get left as x plus 3 squared. And then we're going to do this math out here to the side. So 3 squared is going to be 9. So we're going to have minus 9 plus 4. This is going to be x plus 3 squared. And then negative 9 plus 4 gives me negative 5. And so that is my form that they've asked for here, which is completed square form. Okay? I want you to take a minute and try to follow these steps. Pause the video and try this problem, part B here, and then check your work with me. Okay, so again, what we're going to do is whatever this B term is, the term in front of x, we're going to take that and we're going to divide by 2. In this case, I get negative 2. So we are going to write x, and since that's negative 2, we're going to write minus 2 squared. Always going to subtract that same value. Always, okay? And then we're going to bring this 10 down. So I have x minus 2 squared minus, now negative 2 squared is 4. And then I have to bring this plus 10 down, and then we're going to do that math. So we're going to leave the x minus 2 squared. Negative 4 plus 10 is positive 6. That is my answer. Now let's talk for a second about how would I check that, okay? So if I have this answer and I wanted to check on a test or a quiz to see if my answer was correct, I would just multiply this all out. So remember when we have x minus 2 and it's squared, we write x minus 2 times x minus 2. And then we multiply those binomials. So x times x is x squared. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. And then negative 2 and negative 2 is positive 4. And we bring down our 6. When we combine like terms here, we're going to get negative 4x. And then 4 plus 6 is 10. And so notice this is exactly what we started with. And so that's a good way to be able to check your answer. Okay, this one also asks us to express each of the following in this form. You're going to see a lot of that. So I want you to take another minute and pause the video and try this problem. Then check your answer with me. Okay, the steps are always the same. So we have this negative 2. That's our B term in front of x, and we're going to divide by 2. So negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. So we are going to always write x, and then whatever this is, so minus 1 squared. Then we're always going to subtract whatever this value was squared, and then we're going to bring down anything that was on the end there. So in this case, plus 1. We will always leave this as x minus 1 squared minus. Now, negative 1 squared is positive 1 plus 1. In this case, those two will add to be 0. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. So we will just have x minus 1 squared. Okay, so in this case, if you were asked for what is n was 0 in this case because there's like a plus 0 out there that we don't have to write. M, remember, would have been a positive 1. It's always opposite the inside, so that when I plug it into this equation, if I put m in there as 1, I get x minus 1, which is what I see here. Okay, just some more practice. So take a minute, pause the video, and try this problem, and then check your answer with me. Okay, so again, we are going to take this 8, and we are going to divide by 2, and that gives us 4. So we are going to write x plus 4, since it's positive, squared, and then we're always going to subtract that same value squared, and then bring down anything that we have. But since this is a negative, I have to make sure to bring down a minus 3. This x plus 4 squared is going to stay the same, minus, and then 4 squared here is going to be 16, minus 3. So I am going to get x plus 4 squared, and then this negative 16 minus 3 becomes negative 19. And that's my form. Okay, we're going to take this just a little bit further, and we're going to look at what do we do when a is not 1. So all of the ones we've done up till now have had a 1, a positive 1, in front of the x squared term. In this case, what do we need to do if it's not a 1? And that's when you're going to see this number out here, this a out front, okay? So let's look at an example. Okay, so this 6 here, we have a number in front of this x squared. This 6 has to be taken out. So we want to take that out front. But what we're really doing when we take it out front is we're dividing all of these by 6. So when I do that, I'm going to have x squared plus 2x minus 6. And now we're going to work with the inside just like normal. So we're going to leave the 6 out here. We're going to take this b, this positive 2, and we're going to divide by 2, which gives us 1. So we're going to write x plus 1, since that's a positive 1, squared. But then we're immediately going to subtract that same value squared, and then we're going to bring this negative 6 down inside our bracket. So now we have the 6 out front still. We're going to have x plus 1 squared, and then we're going to do this math. So this is going to be a 1 squared is 1. So we're going to have negative 1 minus 6. So we're going to get x plus 1 squared, and then negative 1 minus 6 is negative 7. And we want this 6 to be back in front of this parentheses. We want it to look like this, and we don't want these brackets here. So this 6 is just going to kind of hang out in front, but it's going to get multiplied by that negative 7, and you can't forget that. So we're going to write 6 parentheses x plus 1 squared, and then 6 times negative 7 is negative 42. So that is my completed square form. Okay, I want you to take another second just for practice, and I want you to pause the video and try to do this problem following the steps that we did over here on your own, and then come check your answer with me. Okay, so we have a 4 here in front of this x squared, and since that's not a positive 1, since it's anything other than a positive 1, we have to take it out. So when I take that out, I'm really dividing all of these by 4. So I'm going to have a 4 out front, and I'm going to have x squared minus 4x minus 5. So that's step 1 if you have something in front of x squared. And then you're going to use the inside, and you're going to do the same steps that we learned at the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to leave this bracket, and I'm going to take this negative 4, and I'm going to divide by 2 because that's my b, and that's going to give me negative 2. So inside I'm going to write x minus 2 squared, and then I'm immediately going to subtract a negative 2 squared. And then I'm going to bring down my minus 5. So I have 4, and I have x minus 2 squared, and I'm going to do all of this math here. So you can do that in your calculator if you need to, but this negative 2 squared is going to be 4, so I'm going to have minus 4, or negative 4 minus 5, which is going to give me a negative 9. And then I just have to remember that the 4 gets put in front of the parentheses, but it gets multiplied by the negative 9. So my answer is going to be 4 parentheses x minus 2 all squared, and then 4 times negative 9 is negative 36. So that's my completed square form for this example. Okay, we're going to look at just a few more. And so if you'll see, this one says express each of the following in this form. And notice we have an a out here, which looks a little different than we're used to. When you see that, I want you to start with the regular form, the way that we've learned it, okay? And you always want this to be in standard form, where you have the exponents in order from highest to lowest. So we're going to rewrite this one as negative 3x squared plus 6x plus 9, because this is how we're used to seeing a quadratic, okay? And then since this is a negative 3 in front of my x squared, I have to take that negative 3 out. And remember, what you're really doing is you're dividing all of these by negative 3. So if I take a negative 3 out front, and I do have to write it out front, it can't go away, okay? I take the negative 3 out front, and I'm going to have x squared. 6 divided by negative 3 is negative 2x, so my sign is changing. And 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3. And then I'm going to do the inside with the same steps that we've been practicing. So I'm going to take this b, this negative 2, and divide by 2, which is negative 1. And I'm going to write x minus 1 squared. And I'm immediately going to subtract a negative 1 squared. Okay, subtract the same value squared. And then I got to just remember to bring my minus 3 down. So I have negative 3. And then I have x minus 1 like normal. And I'm going to do this math. This negative 1 squared is going to be a 1, so I'm going to have negative 1 minus 3, which is going to give me negative 4. And I'm going to move my negative 3 in front and multiply it by this like we've practiced on the other examples. So I'm going to have negative 3 parentheses x minus 1 squared, and then negative 3 times negative 4 is plus 12. Now, this is the form we're used to seeing. Notice the only thing that's different is this a, which we're used to seeing out here, is in front. So I can just rewrite this positive 12 here and in front of this, and then I have minus 3 times x minus 1 squared. So that would be the answer that they're asking you for in this form. Okay, so it's not a big deal. Just write it in the form we're used to first, and then move that number to the front. Okay? All right, take a minute, pause the video, try this problem, and then check your answer with me. Okay, so hopefully you saw this -5 here and you took a -5 out front. And remember that when you do that, what you're really doing is dividing each term by -5. So that's going to give me an x squared here, but that's going to change this sign and I'm going to have -6x, and I'm going to have plus 4/5. Okay, I don't want to write the decimal. If I'm dividing -4 by -5, I get positive 4/5. And so now I'm going to work with just the inside. I'm going to take this -6 and divide by 2 because that's my b, and I get -3. So I'm going to have x minus 3 squared, and then I am going to subtract that same value squared, and then bring down my plus 4/5. Okay, so the steps are the same. We're just working with fractions sometimes. This is going to give me x minus 3 squared, and then you can do all of this math in your calculator. This is going to be a -3 squared, so you're going to have -9 plus 4/5, and if you're going to type the whole thing into your calculator, please make sure that you put parentheses around this -3, just like I've shown here. Okay? All right, and when you do that, that gives us -41/5. That's what this math should give you, so try that in your calculator. And now I'm going to remember to multiply this -5 by this -41/5 and just write it in front of my parentheses. So I have -5 x minus 3 squared, and then negative times negative is going to be plus, and this is just going to give me 41. And that's the form we're used to seeing, and that's fine if that's the form we're asked for, but in this case, remember they asked us to move that value up front. So we're going to rewrite this as 41 in front, and then the rest of this, -5 times x minus 3 squared. That's the form we were asked for. Okay? Okay, go back and review what you need to review, and we will finish working in class.